Now, my people, and welcome back to the Fandom Zone podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, DJ Nick, back in the Fandom Zone this time to take on episode 1 of the third MCU TV series, Loki. And with me today is my fabulous co-host, amazing friend, and the man who is daring enough to let me drive the Fandom Zone bus today, the one and only Charles Skaggs. Hey, Charles, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Nick. Thank you so much. And this is a little weird for me because obviously I'm, a little used to the driving the bus, but if nothing else, this is proof that I don't have to be a complete control freak all the time. I'm willing, this is good for me. This is good that I'm willing to, take the hands off the wheel, let somebody else drive for a while, and I'll just sit back and enjoy the ride as we discuss these next 6 episodes. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, you and me both, and as I said, hopefully it'll be as smooth a ride as possible, and I can, I'll try and avoid all the crazy curves as we discuss this, even though there are quite a few curves to discuss. Also, I wanted, before we actually got more into this episode, Charles, I also wanted to send a big shout out to our third brother, Jesse Jackson.
Yes.
Who, folks, if you have not heard, has successfully dealt with the very serious health issues that were plaguing him and has been given a clean bill of health. And I'm sure Charles will back me up on our relief when it comes to this news.
Yeah. We got the news this week that Jesse's, apparently his mass that was removed from his stomach is actually benign. So hooray. That means no cancer, no need for treatment as far as that goes. Now he still has to recover from his surgeries, which I guess are, restricting his stomach so that he can hopefully lose some weight, I'm guessing, and deal with certain issues because he had a hernia and some other things. So he's having to recover from that, but at least we don't have to worry about cancer, and we don't, Jesse can go on forward with his life, and I'm sure that's a huge load taking off of his and his wife right now. So obviously the positive vibes worked, everybody. So thank you so much for sending those Jesse's way because, hey, we all did it. It was a team effort, and we got him through that. So
yes, indeed. So
good
we're
job,
definitely
everyone.
Good job, team. Exactly. Well played, everybody, for sure. So here at episode 220, we are discussing the first episode of the 6 installment series Loki entitled Glorious Purpose. This was written by Michael Waldron, who is also the showrunner and creator of this series. Our listeners might know him from Harmon Quest. He wrote the Rick and Morty episode The Old Man in the Seat, and is also the co-writer on the upcoming MCU movie Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
This episode, and there definitely are some ties to this, Charles, and I think we'll definitely have to talk about these ties to the Multiverse of Madness movie for sure.
Yes. I'm sure they're going to be setting up some things, definitely.
Oh, big time. And this episode, of course, was directed by Kate Herron, who will apparently be directing all 6 episodes of this season. She directed 4 episodes of the Netflix comedy Sex Education, starring the beloved Gillian Anderson, and of course, also an episode of Daybreak, and has also directed numerous short films, among these Rest Stop, which won her an award. So kudos to her, and it's great to see another female director. And for folks looking for Star Wars ties, as this is the House of Mouse after all, Lucasfilm played a big part in this debut episode, as Industrial Light and Magic are credited with the visual effects and animation, while post-production sound services were mixed up by Skywalker Sound. So nice, I think, coming together there and I don't know about you, Charles, but I had not seen the name Industrial Light and Magic in a long time.
Right? Yeah, it's kind of surprising, but whatever works because obviously, as a Star Wars fan, I'm very familiar with the company and and also Skywalker Sound. So if they're bringing that to this series, I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to be coming up. I think it's going to be pretty amazing, right? It has to be.
Very much so. And actually, before we actually get, kind of count down the cast and some of the trivia here, Charles, just to get your general thoughts, what did you think of this first episode of Loki?
Well, as a notable Doctor Who fan, because, hey, I do Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, and I found this episode to be very timey-wimey. in a lot of ways. There's a lot of heavy, temporal physics and, just all around, very heavy sci-fi concepts being thrown around here. We get the introduction of the Time Variance Authority, which is something from Marvel Comics, and Loki is dropped into this whole new level of the universe that he was never familiar with. So it's very interesting to see Loki as our point of view character into this world, because here's a character that's been around for quite a while. Tom Hiddleston has been playing him for so long, ever since the first Thor movie, and so it's very unusual that he's our entry point into this new world here, and Hiddleston seems to completely picked up Loki right where he left off. He didn't drop a beat. It's just really, he's really dialed into the character. And Owen Wilson, I thought, was a great introduction. We're going to talk about him, obviously, as Mobius M. Mobius. But, yeah, it's a very fascinating. And I thought it was one of the stronger first episodes of these Marvel Cinematic Universe TV shows that we've received so far.
I'm right there with you. And, I was almost wondering to myself, since it seems that Disney has recently been on a trend of doing villain backstories, as we have, of course, seen with Maleficent, recently with Cruella, and it seems like they really are doing this whole thing. And I almost wondered whether this would almost be, once again, the villain retrospective. But I love how it almost shows you that Loki might not be as villainous as folks make him out to be. And, we'll, of course, discuss that when we talk about what goes on in his discussion with... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, he's almost like an anti-hero now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, because I suppose I guess they wanted to make him lovable, should we say, or rather relatable for the viewers, in the sense that if you're going to make him downright evil, are you going to want to watch 6 episodes of Loki being mean and horrible and terrible? Or maybe yes.
I would. I would find that fascinating. I watched Hannibal, and that was fine.
Exactly. It's all about a guy being mean, horrible, and terrible to everybody.
Right.
Exactly. But I suppose you definitely get to see the softer side to him, and it gets very psychological. And being a big fan of kind of psychological thrillers and psychology and what have you, I loved that kind of almost couch moments that we get in this episode, and is the whole thread, and I think it will very much have repercussions as we progress with this series, especially I think by episode 6, Loki might be a very changed man. It might be interesting to see what the end product is after all of this. So I agree with you. A very, very strong episode for sure. So casting-wise, of course, for this episode, naturally we do have the aforementioned Mr. Tom Hiddleston reprising his role as the God of Mischief, Loki Laufeyson. We actually get his last name in this, which I thought was fabulous.
Right.
New faces for the show.
Comic book fans have known this for a while, but it was nice that the Marvel Cinematic Universe finally started using it, right?
Yeah, because of course we'd had Thor Odinson. Thor had been known as that, but I thought it was nice they finally gave him a last name. So I agree with you, Charles, that of course, Marvel Comics fans did know this. And new faces for the show, of course, an episode. We have Gugu Mbatha-Raw as Ravonna Renslayer, whom Doctor Who fans will probably know as Tish Jones, naturally.
Yes, right. Sister of Martha Jones. Yep.
Exactly. Fans of Martha Jones and Tish Jones, you can't not recognize her. Black Mirror, of course, and she was also in the live-action film Beauty and the Beast. And, of course, in the comics, to give a brief rundown here, and Charles, feel free to fill in any holes here if I miss anything important.
Sure.
Ravonna is actually a princess of a puppet kingdom, which is controlled by Kang the Conqueror, of all people,
right,
with whom Ravonna has a long and extensive relationship with throughout her comic book lifespan. It's kind of a back and forth between the two. She has also been known as an antagonist of the Avengers throughout the course of her printed page life. So I guess we shall see where this particular version of the character will go, seeing as Kang should be an upcoming MCU villain in the third Ant-Man film, Quantum Mania. So
right.
I think...
Yeah, this is where I get to pull out the murder board and start connecting the yarn to the various things. And yeah, you have to wonder, because of Kang being introduced, like you said, whether those two crazy kids are going to get together, because in the comics, Ravonna is essentially Kang's love interest.
Yep.
She's the object of his desire, even though initially she hated him because he was trying to conquer her father's kingdom.
Yes.
So, but eventually she apparently falls for him and then tries to take a blast for him, meant for Kang, and ends up in a coma as a result.
Yes, she has quite the history there in the comics.
It's a little complicated, their relationship.
Which hence probably why I guess Waldron said we'll make it a little bit simpler for you guys. But apparently they will be giving us a bit of a definitely development on this character. We also have, of course, Wunmi Mosaku as Hunter B-15, whom our listeners will probably know from the TV show Luther and Lovecraft Country.
Oh yeah, she was fantastic on Lovecraft Country.
Absolutely fabulous. This is actually an original character created for the series.
Ruby Baptiste, who, if you remember, was essentially took this kind of shape-shifting drug or chemical or potion or whatever have you to take on the form of a white woman.
Oh yes, and
to rather gruesome effects when that potion wears off. Right?
Oh, yeah, that is rough. It definitely is. But what a fabulous, fabulous actress. In fact, I was so happy to have such a familiar face from Lovecraft Country. And it seems like a lot of these folks from that TV show are getting work, and as rightfully they should, because it's a fabulous show.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And yeah, so this is actually an original character created for this series. So it's kind of exclusive to the MCU. And apparently we'll be getting... apparently they said they really want to flesh this character out and make her an important part of the MCU. So I guess we'll see where Hunter B-15 goes. We then have Eugene Cordero as the hapless, bumbling receptionist Casey, who Charles will be very familiar with from a certain show called Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yeah,
and
he plays Ensign Sam Rutherford, who, if you watch the show, he's a very fun character. He's a cybernetic character. So, but he's one of those that finds joy in the mundane. So it makes perfect sense to have him as one of like an accountant almost, or just a grunt worker, an office worker working for the Time Variance Authority.
Yeah, I mean, and a very, very fun character indeed. And of course, other than Star Trek Lower Decks, of course, he was also in things like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Kong Skull Island, and The Mule. Also, we do get a certain Tara Strong as the voice of Miss Minutes, who anybody who has seen any kind of superhero animated TV show will know, because this woman has a resume as long as my arm when it comes to her voice work. And I was so happy to actually have her as this kind of Southern Belle going on kind of thing with the Miss Minutes thing. I kind of enjoyed that.
You like the little Southern twang there?
Yeah.
A little bit?
And Charles, I'm sure you're obviously familiar with Tara, because I know you're a big fan of the superhero animated stuff too.
Oh yeah. I know her from, obviously, she's one of the main actresses that have voiced Harley Quinn for the DCU animated projects. Also, she did Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, and notable because she's also Raven on the Teen Titans animated series and Teen Titans Go. And if you're a fan of Cartoon Network shows, you probably recognize her as Bubbles on the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, and I'm so glad they were able to get her on, because she really is fabulous as Miss Minutes. Hopefully we get more of Miss Minutes, because it's just great to hear her. And last but certainly not least, we get a certain Owen Wilson as Mobius M. Mobius, whom, of course, fans of the Night at the Museum franchise will know. Cars, of course, Zoolander, and tons more things. So it was quite the addition there. And a little bit of comics background on this character. He is also from the comics. He's a bureaucrat and part of the TVA's middle management, and actually made his debut in Fantastic Four issue 353, where he actually chides and tries to discipline the Fantastic Four when it comes to their time violations. So it's another maybe tie there. Could we possibly be talking more about the Fantastic Four, getting more Fantastic Four? Who knows? But I like that. And fun story, he, like many members of staff in management, are all clones which were made to resemble longtime Marvel comic book writers Mark Gruenwald first off, and later Tom DeFalco. So I thought that was kind of fun. But here everybody has different faces. But I just wanted to give you guys that. Other trivia, of course, as Charles rightfully mentioned, we get the Time Variance Authority, or TVA, which debuted in the Marvel comic Thor, issue 372 from 1986, created by Walt Simonson and Sal Buscema. Their role in the comics is somewhat similar, I think Charles will agree with me, to the TV show, where they're pretty much in charge of monitoring the multiverse and kind of getting rid of messy timelines or potentially dangerous timelines. And here in the comics, it's actually led by a Mr. Alternity, whom we may or may not see by show's end. Right. And fun story, a little, I guess, Doctor Who anecdote. One of their former employees goes by the name of Professor Justin Alphonse Gamble, who after leaving the TVA steals one of their time capsules and kind of looks like a mishmash of the Doctors. Does that sound familiar, Whovians? Because you should definitely check that out. I mean, were you familiar with this character, Charles, with Justin Alphonse Gamble?
I was not, but I'm not surprised by that. But I'm gonna have to track that down now. Now I'm curious about that. Do you happen to know which issue? I'd actually have to see, because I know it's kind of almost very kind of blink and you'll miss it almost kind of thing. But it's clear that it kind of made almost a mishmash of the various Doctors at the time, and no surprise the fact that he steals a time capsule. Like, yeah, we want to show you guys that we do love Doctor Who. So that was kind of nice on Marvel's part. Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to really get your handle on the Time Variance Authority, the simplest explanation is, if you're a Doctor Who fan, if you're familiar with the Time Lords, that's essentially what they are. Mm-hmm. They're although here they're more like time gardeners. They try to prune and shape and make sure everything is this, as they say, the sacred timeline is running smoothly.
Very much so, and I think that's an excellent comparison. We also get a mention of the Timekeepers, who in this first episode are described as a trio of godlike creatures who oversee the main timeline. And I suppose, just like you were saying, Charles, I suppose one could almost equate these Timekeepers to the Norns from Nordic mythology or the Fates from Greek mythology.
Excellent
I mean, because in the comics, I try, and in the comics, they're created at the end of time by the last director of the TVA, and actually have dealings with Kang as well. Once again, who may actually appear in this series, or who we'll be seeing soon in the Multiverse of Madness movie, I guess, but we'll leave that there. Also, for those who paid attention, in WandaVision, when Loki and us, the viewers, get the rundown on what the TVA does and what their deal is from the mascot Miss Minutes, we get mentions of both the Nexus Point and how it could create madness in the multiverse.
Oh, yeah.
See what they did there, folks?
Mm-hmm.
And
like a multiverse of madness, you're saying?
Maybe, and there could be a Nexus Point?
Interesting. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And two other things which I thought were notable, Charles, was the title screen of the show, I think not only is a nod to Loki's shape-shifting abilities, but I wonder whether it is also a homage to the symmetric block cipher Loki 89 and Loki 91, because these were actually key block ciphers. And I guess Loki is possibly a cipher in his own show, if you will. So I wonder whether there was a nod, because there is actually these block ciphers which were named after the god of mischief. So I thought I'd share that with you guys.
Excellent.
So did you have anything else to add, Charles, before we get to our topics of today?
Well, I did want to add, if you're inclined, I did have some background on D.B. Cooper. For anybody wondering about this historical figure that apparently Loki gets revealed as in the course of this episode. So if you're wondering about D.B. Cooper, it's essentially a media epithet for Dan Cooper, which was this person's pseudonym. So for whatever reason, the media just glommed onto D.B. Cooper. And essentially, this is an unidentified man who hijacked a Boeing 727 aircraft in United States airspace between Portland and Seattle on the afternoon of November 24th, 1971. Mm-hmm. And after a stop at the Seattle-Tacoma airport to collect $200,000 in ransom, which is equivalent to $1.28 million today, so nice little chunk of change there. He picked up also 4 parachutes, and then during the course of the flight, leapt to an uncertain fate over southwestern Washington, setting off this extensive manhunt and a 45-year-long FBI investigation.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's quite the story.
But the perpetrator's identity was never revealed. Like they never found who he was, and his fate is unknown. This crime apparently is the only unsolved air piracy case in commercial aviation history. And the man who actually purchased his airline ticket under the alias of Dan Cooper, this is what happened. He became this DB Cooper, and like I said in the media, but in a kind of little bit of a Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast side reference here. The name Dale Cooper, the character played by Kyle MacLachlan on Twin Peaks, was, it's Dale Bartholomew Cooper on that, which essentially is DB Cooper. So Dale Cooper on Twin Peaks was named after DB Cooper, the air pirate, shall we say.
Oh, very nice, very nice. In fact, I was hoping you would throw in a David Lynch reference there. So I'm so glad you're the man for the job when it comes to that.
I don't want to let you down, but yeah, it's there.
You never do. So you never do. So as our cast is pretty restricted in this first episode, Charles, I thought we could break it up into segments of like how the episode unfolds and the characters we get to play within the episode. So we have 3 topics today. First topic, I like to call it Loki for all time, always. Excellent. Where we have, of course, episode 1, of course, Loki Glorious Purpose starts off with the scene from Avengers Endgame 2012, y'all. So where Loki is able to get his shackled hands on the Tesseract, disappears through the portal it creates, and our Master of Mischief is then catapulted in the middle of the Gobi Desert, where he's picked up by Hunter B-15 and her team, and is brought to the TVA to stand trial for deviating from the timeline in front of Ravonna Renslayer. Note that this is obviously not the Loki who is killed by Thanos in Infinity War. He's named Variant L1130, later referred to by his full name, of course, Loki Laufeyson. Right. So, Charles, here, of course, we got our first introduction to, characters like Hunter B-15 and Ravonna, and, of course, we got our first look at the TVA. What were your thoughts on these new characters? I mean, starting, I suppose, with Hunter B-15 and Ravonna.
Well, I thought they were very interesting. Obviously, Ravonna is from the comics, but this is a very different depiction of that character here. Because here she's presented as a judge who gets to sentence Loki for his crimes. And I find it interesting that, Hunter B-15, who is like you said, you mentioned earlier, is an original character. I thought that it kind of gave a little more. I would say it gave this pursuit, and gave Loki someone to rail against, because as he's trying to sort of develop this relationship with Mobius M. Mobius, he still kind of needs someone to be antagonistic toward. And Hunter B-15 is a very great foil for him in that regard. So the actress Wunmi Mosaku is just fabulous here. I thought she was very interesting. And, having watched her on Lovecraft Country, it just made this character, which normally would have been probably in lesser hands, very forgettable. I thought it would have made her much more interesting. And I'm curious to see what her role will be going forward in her dealings with Loki, whether she's going to be, perhaps uncomfortably partnered with Loki during some of these missions, or if she's just constantly going to be trying to make him accountable for his crimes, because as far as she's concerned, Loki is just this variant they need to get rid of, and that he should be reset, as we're told. So as far as she's concerned, they should just reset him and forget about him. But Mobius, unfortunately for her, sees some potential there, and we'll see where that goes.
Very much so. And I'm right there with you when
Nick?
it comes to... I mean, I'm very much there with you because I guess Hunter B-15, I suppose, is very much dedicated to her job. Mm-hmm. She's kind of like, I guess, that cop who's kind of married to their job. But I know I bring this up a lot, but it kind of reminds me kind of like Judge Dredd, if you will, because that's literally what she lives and dies for, is serving the TVA. And it seems like she very much has it almost. Nice. I see what you did there, sir. Yeah. And also, granted, we don't know too much about the timekeepers at this point, but she very much seems to almost venerate them and consider them gods. And you do wonder whether they are really gods or not. And I mean, just like Ravonna is the same way. She's very much, they are our superiors. They are, all powerful. Mm-hmm. And, you do wonder whether it might be just like almost like a Wizard of Oz situation where there's like people behind the curtain who are not as powerful as they make out to be. And so it will be curious for that. But yes, I do wonder whether I'm sure that the Hunter B-15 low-key rivalry, if you will be something that will probably continue throughout these episodes. We might kind of almost get like the cops and robbers kind of deal with her, and Loki's kind of like chasing her because, Mobius not as much, but I think she might be the cop to his robber, where they're just constantly chasing each other. I could almost like a Benny Hill sketch where they're chasing each other in a room. They could kind of do that in the TV.
So break out the Yakety Sax by Boots Randolph, but.
Thank you. That's right. Yeah, I think that could very much work for them. And yeah, Ravonna, I mean, granted, we don't get too much of her, but already I was intrigued because she does seem to very much buy the whole concept of the TVA. And apparently there will be a lot of focus on this character as we progress. I guess at this point, she's very much the one who's kind of keeping judgment in this, in the TVA, but apparently there will be much more to her. And I like she kind of reminded me a little bit of Judge Judy for some reason. So she's like, I'm not buying your crap.
Timey-wimey Judge Judy. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, yes. I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I thought it was a very understated introduction to Ravonna because we know she has this connection to Kang. So I kind of wonder, okay, we're just going to introduce this character. Maybe people, they won't think much of her, but then she's going to be a player later on. So I think everybody kind of needs to keep an eye on Ravonna a little bit because the way things seem to be settling down here is that, especially with this series, that, it just is like, the phases 1 through 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe were all about Thanos and the Infinity Stones and all that, the Infinity Gauntlet. I think going forward from Phase 4, this feels to me like the first very real Phase 4 series. And I think we're going to start, the main plot line is going to be involving time and involving Kang and Ravonna and maybe Kang's future self, Immortus. So I think everybody needs to keep an eye on Ravonna here.
I do. If the previous MCU TV shows have taught us anything, it's always watch the quiet one in the background, or the one who seems the less kind of the most, should we say, conspicuous.
Because right now, I'm sorry I didn't interrupt, but yeah,
go ahead.
Right now, she's just she's there to judge Loki guilty of violating the sacred timeline, and Loki is very resistant to it. Of course, he's like hey, it's not me, it's the Avengers. You need to focus on these guys. You should be
judging them.
Right, exactly. Like, why are you going after me when these guys are doing time heists, for crying out loud? But Ravonna doesn't really buy into that, and she's just ready to judge him guilty until Mobius steps in and kind of frees Loki there at the last moment from her judgment. And sentence.
Yes, exactly. And we actually, before we do actually get to Mobius M, I actually was wondering, from a visual perspective, Charles, were you happy with the way the TVA was portrayed? Did you like, should we say, the atmosphere, the ambience, or what have you? Was it everything you hoped it might be?
Well, the backstory we get with the TVA is obviously told through that Miss Minutes animation, which I thought was very cute. And, this, for a lot of people, the timey-wimey stuff, the time travel stuff, makes their heads hurt. Now, obviously me, I've watched Doctor Who since I was 15, so I'm okay with it. I'm pretty good. I'm good with temporal physics, okay? That's kind of my jam. So it wasn't a big deal for me, but I know a lot of people, they kind of need this stuff a little dumbed down for them because it's a little overwhelming. It's a little above their usual interest, what have you. So I thought it was good. I thought it was almost like a very Jurassic Park kind of type, I kept waiting for
Mr. DNA.
Like talking about dino DNA. Even with a little bit of the same Southern drawl, a little bit. That
I'm sure it might have been a
little bit of an
homage to Mr. DNA.
Yeah. So I thought that was a very clever way to introduce all these big concepts, but the big gist is, where they talk about these things, and I have a theory about what they could potentially be setting up here, because they talk about this vast multiversal war where countless timelines battle for supremacy, nearly destroying everything, and the Timekeeper supposedly stepped in by reorganizing the timelines into one, naming it the Sacred Timeline. So what happens if that separates again, right? So, and then this is where they talk about that, sometimes people are called variants, and they veer off, and they create a new timeline that could potentially start another multiversal war. So that's what they're setting up here, this possibility that there may be war of the multiverse, which makes me wonder if they're setting up the Secret Wars miniseries by Jonathan Hickman and Asad Rabik, because that was a big game changer, and the Fantastic Four were a rather big part of that, because Hickman had written the Fantastic Four series prior to this, and also then wrote Avengers prior to this. So this was a big deal, and it was one of those because Jonathan Hickman as a writer he's great at world building and playing the long-term storylines. So
this is true.
So my theory is that this might be to use a previous term, endgame here. For this new Phase 4 storyline going forward.
Oh, I mean, I
what do you think?
have a feeling. I have a feeling that whole, aside from it being really, really fun, and as you very well said, there's possibly a homage to Mr. DNA in Jurassic Park. I wonder whether they were literally, aside from obviously explaining all the new concepts to folks who did not know, it's almost like, this is MC or Marvel Comics 101 kind of thing going on. But it almost seemed like they were giving us, like you were pointing out, almost a synopsis of what the next phase will be about.
Right.
Without, literally saying this is what... So I almost interpret it as, this is what we're going to be doing next phase, folks. So it's literally going to be multiple realities in the multiverse. Also seeing the titles we're getting of certain films, I think it's one can make the educated guess.
Right. This is what they're teasing here. This multiversal war, is what we're... this is it. They're introducing, they're setting this up, they're teeing it up right there for everybody. And when you have the same writer writing this series that's setting up Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is right there. So more of the multiverse. So we're going to see variants of heroes. That's why we have these descriptions, introductions of the variant concept that are being done here. So this is all this is all the preliminary stuff to try to get you so that they can take those basic concepts and then play with them in bigger things like the movies later on.
Totally. And I also have to say I loved the actually the way the TVA was portrayed. I really enjoyed the sets. And also when Loki actually gets to look outside and see something that almost, I mean, it's kind of reminiscent of Asgard, almost, if you will, and it's kind of almost spacey kind of thing. And I think he almost feels like he's almost come home, because he almost says, in his face, it's almost like this looks like Asgard to me. And I think the concept of that we are outside of time, literally, because it's like a pocket outside of time.
Right.
It's beautiful. I mean, and I just love that shot, as I said, when Loki's looking out and we get this
incredible
very sci-fi
cityscape. Yeah, very sci-fi cityscape. It reminded me almost like, because Walt Simonson, who created the Time Variance Authority and Thor, brought them back for his Fantastic Four run, for Walt Simonson's Fantastic Four run. And it was there that the Fantastic Four, we kind of got to see their headquarters. So, and it almost reminded him. I thought it was like very evocative of Simonson's designs in a lot of ways. That this sprawling, very futuristic cityscape, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was very cool, and Loki being the point of view character, grasping all this, because at first Loki's just like, why haven't I heard of the Time Variance Authority before? Like I've been doing Marvel movies since Thor 2011, and you guys have never come up. And then we get the explanation, well, they never needed to come up until now. So what's different now? And Loki is described as a variant, so presumably he's part of this, but I'm sure he's not the last. And it's fair. I find it interesting that the Time Variance Authority will be in charge of this, and now that they've introduced this, obviously they can use it for other things. So, like for one thing, we don't really know what Captain America was up to after he went back to return the Infinity Stones to their proper points in the timeline, right?
Exactly, that is still to be explained. And also, funny that you mentioned that, because they do also talk about, because I'm sure fans would have probably brought this up, is why didn't they go after the Avengers? And Ravonna literally says that was supposed to happen.
Right.
What the Avengers did with their time heist was meant to be, so it's kind of okayed by the timekeepers. So that was fine. But
and Loki's just like, well, okay, so who decides what that's okay and then what I do isn't okay? Where does that happen? I want to speak to that guy who makes that decision.
Maybe we might meet Mr. Alternity eventually. Who knows? Because he's apparently the big boss of at least in the comics. And the curious thing that Infinity Stones are aplenty in the TVA, and they have zero worth. Apparently, they're
paperweights. We're told that they're the paperweights in the Time Variance Authority, and Loki, just trying to process this because the Infinity Stones, up till now, we were told, are like the most powerful objects in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And Loki, okay, you have the power to reduce these to just paperweights. So how powerful does that make you? So essentially, and Loki poses this question. He's like, "Are you the most powerful thing in the universe?" Yeah. So, until we meet something else that's even more powerful, presumably, but because that's going to happen, right? But it is very interesting that and you notice they didn't have just 6 Infinity Stones; they had several from different timelines. Yeah. So that means different multiverses, right? Or different universes. So we could be dealing with Infinity War times infinity here. If I didn't just blow your mind with that one.
I was just going to say, is your mind blown yet, folks? Yes, I thought that was a cool concept indeed that they addressed that. So as we did talk about him a little bit, Charles. I think we should talk about one of the characters who pretty much has a big role in this first episode. we get to our second topic here, which is I like to call the Mobius configuration and the time theater. Where, of course, where we find that during Loki's hearing, kind of staving off his execution, like you were saying, is a certain Mobius M. Mobius, who seems to take a particular interest in Loki. And a large part of this episode finds Mobius and Loki having an almost analyst versus patient discussion as to literally what makes Loki tick and why does he do the thing he does, until later revealing his true reasons for this great interest he has in Loki. So, talking a little bit more here about Mobius M. Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, and, I guess the relationship that he starts off here with Loki. What did you make of Mobius?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say I love Owen Wilson in this role. He brings a lot of the same type of, a little bit of a folksy charm that because I don't know if you ever saw the movies Shanghai Noon with Jackie Chan. Or Shanghai Nights, but movies like that, or like the Grand Budapest Hotel, or Wedding Crashers, or whatever. He has that certain charm, but here he brings it, like you said, in almost like a very therapist role, and because of the Time Variance Authority stripping Loki of his power, Loki is helpless here to do anything about being analyzed here. He's unable to escape. He's unable to, because he's wearing this neck collar for most of this episode that can be apparently used to just stop him dead in his tracks with the press of a button. And almost he's almost like a walking DVR where he can be rewound and fast forwarded, at the controller's leisure, right? So he's helpless to prevent this. So all he can do is just kind of listen and sit there. And everything, every time he walks away, just Mobius presses the button and boom, he's right back in the seat, right? So Mobius, he really dives deep. And that's one of the things I've found really compelling about this episode is we really get to deep dive into Loki's persona, his personality. He's, Mobius calls him out and says, well, okay, you say you don't enjoy inflicting terror on people, but you do seem to enjoy it, don't you? You took a lot of pleasure in it, and they bring up the death of Phil Coulson as an example.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Loki's, very dismissive of it, and there's a very powerful moment later on where Loki views the footage of his mother being killed because of his actions in Thor: the Dark World, right?
Dark World, yeah. Yeah, which obviously for this Loki hasn't happened yet, obviously.
Yes, so this is his, because this Loki, and we get this explanation that this Loki is, the 2012 Loki that after the events of the first Avengers movie was put in custody, but he gets a hold of the Tesseract and disappears.
Yeah. So he's literally out of the timeline. Yeah.
Right. So as a result, he's this variant. So as far as where this Loki is, he's never experienced, Thor: The Dark World or Thor: Ragnarok, or ultimately meeting his own end in Avengers Endgame, right?
Yeah, exactly. Infinity
War. Excuse me. Yeah, it's sometimes hard to keep them straight, right? So apologies, but so he, there's a sequence where he finally is able to watch this stuff on his own, and he's fascinated by it. Like he studies the point where his mother is being killed. He studies the moment where his father Odin says that he loves him, and Thor is saying, look, I thought we'd be fighting side by side forever, and that you're not bad, and I'd give you a hug if I could. But and then he sees that last footage of his own death, the hands of Thanos.
Yes.
So it's making him reevaluate. And this is something that this Loki has never done. So it's changing him already because he's able to glimpse his own future. And Mobius kind of exploits this because,
very much so.
As it turns out, Mobius has a goal. We find out by the end of the episode, he wants Loki to hunt this fugitive variant that's killing their Minutemen. And they need his help because, well, hey, the variant they're hunting is him. So essentially, the whole purpose of Mobius saving Loki from being reset and killed is that they need him to fight himself.
Yeah, or another version of him, because there might be because there are some other, of course, cast members who have been cast who have yet to be revealed who they're playing. And I know there has been some theories about even Lady Loki, but we'll get to that, of course, now. Third topic, but I'm right there with you, Charles. I actually, because of course we've got the Drunk Cinema Theatre and we have the Gold Standard Theatre.
Yes.
Here we have the Time Theatre, which you were, of course, talking about. Exactly, no relation. But the concept of the Time Theatre, I thought, was one of the most interesting parts of this episode.
Right.
And to even put yourself in that situation of being able to watch what your life will be like.
Right.
It must definitely be very hard on the mind to know what you're going to be doing before you even do it, or how even you're going to die, or how certain decisions of yours will then precipitate other events.
Right.
I thought that was amazing, and I have to say kudos to Tom Hiddleston for just playing running the gamut of emotions, because he starts off as very snarky, as he often is, to being downright depressed. I mean, when he literally, because we know that he had very little love maybe for Odin, but he absolutely loved his mother.
Right.
And to see that, and to almost find out that he caused her death, maybe inadvertently, kind of telling, the Dark Elves to go down a certain corridor, and that all happening. You just see a man kind of just literally reduced to nothing, because he just is like, wow, this is what happened to me. And so I thought the concept of the theater was fabulous. Mobius, I think, because he seems to be part psychoanalyst, part hard-boiled detective, because
and a little bit of a manipulator here, because he is intentionally pushing Loki's buttons. Here.
Oh, yes.
There's that great moment where he points out, Loki's, talking about killing Mobius, and Mobius replies, well, like you killed your mother, which is a very hardcore thing to say, right? So, you're going to kill me like you killed your mom? And it's a little harsh, dude, but he's doing this intentionally because I think he's wanting to kind of tear Loki down in the hopes of rebuilding him back up better. Yeah,
he maybe he could almost be like a Clarence Oddbody, if you will. Maybe kind of like, this is your life. Here's maybe what you can do to make it better, almost. But yeah, because I also kind of got the kind of detective thing, because of the fact that obviously we do see Mobius hunting the variant in other moments, where they even go to like medieval France, and they go to other such places. And so I guess, because, folks who've seen a lot of maybe police or shows or cop shows, you do have this kind of detective who likes to get into the head of whoever might help crack the case, which I think is very much what Mobius is doing. And I think maybe that's what Owen Wilson was maybe also going for, is let's get into the mind almost of a serial killer and see how he, kind of almost like Silence of the Lambs, I suppose. You're kind of talking to Hannibal Lecter, saying, how can we catch this other killer on the loose?
Like a cross between Doctor Who and Columbo, a little bit.
But I love that. That's a great comparison. So
Loki, just one more question, Loki.
Yes, my wife was telling me this, and that he always brings up his wife, and we never see her, which is
right. We did see her, because she was played by Kate Mulgrew from Star Trek Voyager.
We did eventually get to see the famous wife that Columbo was always talking about. The back and forth between the two is great, and I'm sure that obviously, at the end of the day, they're going to be the team up in this as they kind of go in pursuit of this variant. And yeah, Owen Wilson was just fabulous in this. And I just loved how deep it goes into the whole concept of you seem to show pleasure in your killing. And the highlight reel that we got, I mean, did you find that, did you like that? Or do you find that maybe a little bit redundant, kind of knowing that how many times we'd seen those scenes, Charles? Or do you think they added to the whole episode?
You know, in a little bit of a way, if it did feel like a little bit of a clip show, right? We got to going back and seeing some various footage. But I thought it was important because Mobius was illustrating points here. And one of the points that he illustrates is that Loki's actions, and like especially in the case of the Avengers, because he killed Phil Coulson, that galvanized the Avengers to actually avenge Coulson and form the team. You know, so Loki, you know, his actions actually have important consequences. If it wasn't just, you know, Loki, because Loki, as far as he's concerned, he just wants to become king of Earth, right? King of the 9 realms. But Mobius points out, like, well, that's all nice and good, but, you know, what you're doing, you know, you try to be a villain, but you're not very good at it. You know, you fail a lot. But in your attempts, you do affect things, and the Avengers, you know, we see the hologram of them in that great shot where they're all 6, the original 6 Avengers are all lined up in a circle, or you know, they're all together in a circle from the first Avengers movie.
Yeah,
that big dramatic moment where we get the great Avengers theme music, and you know, dun, 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 dun. So. But it shows, you know, like Loki's a player, and Mobius knows that, and he sees the potential in Loki. But yeah, it's a very fascinating that he's like a part therapist, like a part detective, like you said, and you know, I'm curious to see where this is going to go, because now with Mobius stripping Loki down and maybe getting his confidence a little bit. Like, hey, look, you could be something more. We'll see where that goes going forward. But it's very compelling. And Owen Wilson, like you said, is just fabulous in this.
It is very compelling for sure. And so any other further thoughts on this relationship, Charles, before we get to our third topic?
No, I think we're good. I think we pretty much covered it. But, yeah, we'll see. And, you know, maybe Mobius has his own agenda, but I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it really is the catching the thief, if you will. Should we say use a thief to catch a thief, probably, right, while maybe trying to reform Loki at the same time while in the process.
But one of the big questions is, okay, if this thief, you know, the other Loki is dealt with, what happens to this Loki, right?
Yeah, because of course we do have to figure that the sacred timeline, Loki,
does he get put back in to the timeline so that he can eventually go through the motions and get killed by Thanos, or is this series, and I have to wonder about this, is this series going to be one of the things that's used to change certain events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
You make an excellent point, because I suppose, as even the X-Men movies taught us, there is always that reset button just in case to let you know you can bring everybody back just by doing a time deal. So.
Well, maybe if the timeline has changed, maybe this is how they're going to introduce the Fantastic Four and the X-Men.
It could very well be. I think would be an ideal way to do it. And I suppose it'll be interesting to see how they handle all that for sure. So I guess we get to our third and final topic for today, which I thought the ideal title would be Deadly Variant. Now, folks, don't come after me for that title. That's seeing the times we're going through. But bear with me here.
The UK might be particularly sensitive to that right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, British folks, please, I do want to come back to the UK eventually. Don't shut me out, folks. Please don't. I have family over there.
Don't take it personally, guys.
Exactly. Definitely don't, for sure. So, we are, of course, transported to 1859 Salina, Oklahoma, where we get a group of hunters who go searching for someone who's messed with the timeline, is trying to get rich by drilling for oil as is what their theory is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if only that was the case, as actually it's a hooded figure is then revealed to be waiting for the squad, setting them on fire with the oil in the field in a very brutal moment.
Right.
And of course, the face of this figure behind this, should we say, hood or cloak is not revealed, but we assume it is Loki. So when it comes to this, Charles, what did you make of this ending, and do you have any theories on who's behind the hood?
Well, I think the main theory is probably that it is a female Loki, right? Because played by one of the actresses that her whose role has not been revealed yet. So I think that's where they're setting up, and then we're probably going to see her at the end of episode 2. I'm guessing.
Ooh, so you think as soon as episode 2 we might get this lady Loki?
We only have 6 episodes, so they're going to have to introduce her. They don't want to just be hiding. I mean, they could drag it out, but I hope they don't, because we want to see, we want to see Loki, if nothing else, Loki's reaction to another Loki that's female, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Captain Jack's reaction to the Doctor being female on Doctor Who. I'm sorry I keep going back to Doctor Who, but it's that quick go-to reference for me. But I thought it was, before all this happens, though, we get that segment in 1549 France, where Mobius and his team, they're assessing a murder of a hunter, and they go to this cathedral. And I think this also sets up the hooded Loki, if you will, because, they come across this child who, was a witness to this, and the child is essentially, they're asking, Mobius asked the child, okay, so who did this? And the child points over at the stained glass window with an image of the devil. But is it the devil, or is it the female version of Loki, which has the large horned helmet?
That's exactly where I was going, yep.
And the child apparently also has blue teeth. And Mobius is obviously very interested in that. It's okay, where did how did this happen? And the child shows him a pack of kablooey bubblegum.
Yes.
And presumably because, blue, right? Kablooey, get it? And so the question is, okay, where did this gum come from? Because, hey, it's 1549. So presumably that was maybe the hooded Loki that gave the child this pack of gum in the midst of all this. And we'll see what it is going forward. But I thought that was very interesting. What did you make of that scene?
I love that. I mean, I was right there with you when it came to the whole thing of the devil. I mean, I have a feeling it is, this female Loki, or the variant Loki, if you will.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see where that goes. But I love the way it was played through, and it seems to be a trait that MCU villains like to give their kids candy, because we saw it with Baron Zemo, and now
it's villains, right? Of
course. How do you entice children?
Yeah, strangers with candy, not a good sign, but again, it's okay, did the female Loki drive up in an unmarked white van, and but
I have to also say though, when I saw the devil, I was kind of like, could this be justice for myself and Charles? We actually get Mephisto.
Well, yeah, hey, those Mephisto theories, we'll hang on to those, but I'm more inclined to think it's the female Loki, right? Because of her, from the comics, she has this great horned helmet, because that Loki had in his original appearances.
Yes, I mean, I'm right there with you, and it's curious that the female characters in the Marvel comics seem to have the best helmets ever. I think of Hela's design as well. His helmet was the best helmet ever.
You can credit Jack Kirby for that, because
yes,
Jack was a master at creating these elaborate headpieces. Just because he was just such an imaginative artist. So you got to give credit. You got to give credit to Jack the King Kirby.
Any day of the week for sure. And speaking of which, I thought it was actually curious to go back to that whole concept that Loki didn't actually get to see his sister when it came to the highlight reel, because you got to see him and Thor kind of talking about, talking to Odin before he died, which is of course from where we actually do get Hela. But he didn't actually get to see that. I mean, maybe it would have been too much had they shown that as well. So maybe it's implied that he did find out that Hela did show up. But I thought it was curious that we didn't get that particular moment. But yeah, when it came to this variant, I thought it was great how dark this episode went from the beginning, because we kind of get this almost sci-fi futuristic thing going on. And then we're brought into this very dark ending, because the way this deadly variant kills the hunters is brutal.
It was.
The fact that
setting them on fire, right? Yeah. So it was, I thought it was interesting also because the flames were in, it had been pre-planned, obviously, and it was this circular pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm wondering was it just a circle or was it a symbol, like a rune type symbol or an arcane symbol?
Yeah, because
we didn't get really an overhead shot of that, but I'm just kind of wondering about that. I'm wondering if there was a reason that it was in that shape.
We might get a bird's eye view of it maybe in the second episode. I guess we'll see. But you make a good point, because I suppose also seeing all these films where folks like to create burning insignias of their logo, from The Crow to Daredevil to tons of others.
That's a great point. Yeah. So it's almost like I'm wondering if the hooded Loki was trying to leave a message with these deaths.
It could very well be, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what I guess will be more revealed in episode 2. And Charles, did you have anything else, any thoughts on this episode before we move on?
No, I don't. I mean, I thought it was just fantastic. It was a very strong opening, and because throwing a lot of concepts at you.
Yeah.
But doing it through a character that a lot of audiences, the audiences were already familiar with. So I thought it was a very clever and, just great dialogue, great writing, and just a fantastic key performances between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston. Because this episode centered around that. That was the linchpin of this episode, and they pulled it off magnificently, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think if those two didn't click, probably the whole episode would have fallen flat, and so it was essential.
Yeah,
these two clicked. So I'm very much there with you, and definitely looking forward to episode 2. So let's get to favorite quotes then. I believe that there were quite a few that you enjoyed in this episode, Charles, because you did mention some great writing.
I got a few pages of these. No, I'll try to keep it to a minimum. I'll try to pick a few of my favorites. So let's see. Ravonna, when she's about to charge Loki or sentence Loki, she says, she reads off as Laufeyson, variant L, aka Loki Laufeyson, is charged with sequence violation 7-20-89. How do you plead? And Loki replies, Madam, a god doesn't plead.
Very nice.
I thought that was great. Let's see. There's a couple of quotes that I think are related, so they're very short. Loki with Mobius saying, I'm going to burn this place to the ground. And Mobius says, I'll show you where my desk is. You can start there. And then Loki says, this place is a nightmare. And Mobius replies, that's another department. Now that department I'll help you burn down.
Yeah, the writing was so good in this.
Yeah, it just very, very amazing. Just very solid. And I'll give one last one here.
Mm-hmm.
Loki saying, this is a pretty key moment, I thought. I don't enjoy hurting people. I don't enjoy it. I do it because I have to, because I've had to. And Mobius replies, okay, explain that to me. Loki says, Because it's part of the illusion. It's the cruel, elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear. And Mobius replies, a desperate play for control. You do know yourself. Loki says, a villain. And Mobius replies, that's not how I see it.
Yeah, but it's very, very telling.
And it's very insightful, I think.
Oh, yeah, and as you said before,
Charles, mindset, if nothing else, that he sees that potential in Loki.
Oh, yes. And as you mentioned before, kudos definitely to the writing, because it was such a strongly written episode.
How about you,
I'm actually gonna, because I had a few that you actually did. I'm gonna ended up tied up with a little ribbon here. Mobius to Loki. Mobius saying, "I'm taking you someplace to talk," and Loki's like, "I don't like to talk," and Mobius like, "But you do like to lie, which you just did, because we both know you love to talk. Talky.
Talky. And he does the little hand gesture, talky.
Yes, so that was fabulous. So I wonder how much of this was actually on the page and how much was it just off the cuff, because it seems that a little bit might have been a little bit of riffing,
I think it was part of it, maybe. I mean, I could see Owen Wilson riffing a little bit here. Yeah, I could see that.
I got that feeling that maybe some of it was not on the page, but hey, kudos to them if that was the case.
Because he is a comedy writer, so he might have been inclined to kind of riff the dialogue. The question is, of course, how much were they allowed to? But I could see him ad-libbing there on that.
It would not surprise me either, knowing what a great comedian is. So let's get to ratings then. Charles, what do you give this debut episode out of 10?
Well, like I said, I thought it was very strong, so I'm going to give it 9 out of 10. Infinity Stone paperweights.
Very nice, very nice. I'm actually right there with you. I'm also going to give it 9 out of 10 Josta cans. As interestingly, we get Josta here, which I did forget to mention, folks, which was the very first energy drink ever to come on the market. And I thought it was kind of fun that it seems to be Mobius's drink of choice. So yeah, it's 9 out of 10 Josta cans for me. So, Fandom Zone fandom news. We do have some. Charles, I do have a few. If there's anything else you want to add after I've kind of read these off, feel free to add. So, when it comes to the movie world, we did get the announcement of the sequel for the Aquaman film, which will be entitled Aquaman and the Last Kingdom, which is quite far down on Warner Brothers' release slate. It is primed for a December 16th, 2022 premiere. I'm sure our patience will pay off, but just so you know, folks, the title will be Aquaman and the Last Kingdom. When it comes to the MCU, Marvel's She-Hulk series has found its villain in The Good Place star and game show host of The Misery Index, Jamila Jamil, who will be playing none other than Titania. So I was really, really happy about this. And so I think those are kind of like the main things I had here. Did you have anything else to add, Charles?
Well, I did want to add that, because previously, the past 8 weeks, we've been discussing Jupiter's Legacy, the past 4 weeks, because we did 2 episodes per week. Okay.
Yes.
But we discussed Jupiter's Legacy. And of course, just after we finished discussing Jupiter's Legacy, Netflix decides, okay, we're going to cancel the show after only 1 season. But according to the Hollywood Reporter, the budget was obviously a major factor here, because then, the original showrunner, Stephen DeKnight, reportedly told Netflix that each episode would cost at least $12 million, but Netflix backed him down to just $9 million per episode. And when the production started running into problems, DeKnight was replaced suddenly by Sang-Kyu Kim from The Walking Dead, who then had to, quote unquote, retool the first batch of episodes. And of course, that drove up the cost even beyond what DeKnight had originally asked for. And insiders believe the final budget of the season was expected to be upwards of $200 million.
Wow.
So, and apparently it wasn't for the ratings, because the show did get ratings. People were watching Jupiter's Legacy, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
So essentially it boiled down to, like, Netflix lost control of the budget here. They and apparently
so they did a Swamp Thing kind of deal.
They weren't. Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to that. Yes, that Swamp Thing. It wasn't because people were watching the show. It was because Netflix was losing too much money on the show. And if they're not making money with the show, they're not getting the benefits of this investment. And this is something that Netflix had really wanted to be like one of their prime shows. They were banking on this show succeeding. And because it was having so many creative problems and costing, like I said, $200 million, which didn't really reflect in the budget that we saw on screen, right? So,
Nope.
So they pulled the plug. They canceled it. And now they're going to work with a different Mark Millar property, Super Crooks, which deals with the bad guys of the Millarverse, if you will. So whether they're going to salvage some of the things from Jupiter's Legacy, I don't know, but it's very frustrating. Just the fact that, and it makes me worried for the Sandman, because that's also on Netflix. And Netflix is apparently, if we're not getting like a big bang for our buck right off the bat, we're going to cancel it after just one season. So if they do that with Sandman, I'm going to be completely livid if they do that.
You're going to have company in me, Charles, when it comes to that, because I've been waiting for Sandman so long. And it's such a shame about Jupiter's Legacy, but yeah, as I pointed out before, it seems like it kind of turned out to be a Swamp Thing kind of deal, which was actually a great show, but once again, it looked like the budget ran away from, what was it, Warner Brothers, who were running it at the time?
Yeah, because it was on DC Universe streaming service at the time, yeah.
So I'm assuming the ones paying the bills was Warner Brothers probably then,
right.
But...
yeah, I mean, they tried to make a little bit more money with it by putting it on the CW afterwards as kind of like a second run. But it wasn't enough to save the show. We're not getting a season 2, so just seems like a very wasted opportunity there. And especially since the show got really good toward the end, it's like just when they're starting to get to the good stuff, they pull the plug. Because we voiced our concerns, like hopefully Netflix doesn't do this. Well, sure enough, they did. So thanks for proving us right, Netflix. Thanks so much.
And it seems like, somebody else will probably be voicing their opinion when it comes to that, because Fandom Zone fan mail, we do have some fan mail today from the ever-devoted and dedicated damsel that is Holly McMillan. Hey, and Holly, of course, writes, "Hey, Nick and Charles." Hey, Holly.
Hey, Holly.
Man, what an enjoyable first episode. Loved the whole vibe of the TVA with its training videos to explain why Loki is in the situation that he's in. Kind of got a bit of a Jurassic Park vibe. There you go, Charles, just like you. With that video and the pacing of it, the robots that dematerialized Loki's clothes must have had tech defabricator gun that was used on Jack Harkness back in series 1 of New Who. Well pointed out. See, a lot of Who connections here. What can I say about Owen Wilson as Agent Mobius? Perfect casting. Loved him in Shanghai Noon and Nights and some of his other films. So nice to see him back in action. So, Loki had to stop himself. This is going to be fun. I was also surprised as to how many Infinity Stones or gems that looked like them were floating around. Can't wait to find out more about the TVA and to see how the relationship between Mobius and Loki goes from here. Is it Wednesday yet? Holly from Wisconsin. Thanks so much for that, Holly.
So here's my question. Thank you again, Holly, for writing in. We always appreciate you writing in. I'm glad you're writing in for Loki, definitely. But what's going to stop Loki? If I was Loki, I would just pocket those Infinity Stones, like grab as many as I could, stuff them in my pocket so that whenever I eventually escaped from the Time Variance Authority, think of all that power you would have, right? So
yeah, I mean, it would be such a low-key move going, haha, who's going to stop me now?
Or what's going to, how great would it be eventually if, if we end up seeing Kang or Immortus and as the big bads, and Loki is like, hey, I know a way to stop them, and goes to the Time Variance Authority to where what's his name, Casey is, and just stockpiles on Infinity Stones, and then brings them back to help fight Kang and Immortus.
Ooh, that would be huge. I'd love that.
Wouldn't that
I'll
be
pay
great?
for that.
Wouldn't that be great?
I'll pay to see that. Yes, for sure. So, of course, thank you as always, Holly. And while we're at it, I thought we wanted to also, I mean, at least I do, I'm sure Charles will be with me on this. I want to also wish you, Holly, and your podcast co-hosts, Brittany, Christy, and Rachel, a very happy 7th podcasting birthday. Because the Irish Fangirls recently turned 7 years old. So 7 years of podcasting is no small feat. So, definitely congrats to them.
Yeah, I told Holly when she was on Next Up Everywhere this past week that, Next Up Everywhere is actually turning 7 later in the year as well. So everybody's turning 7, and, I wish them, very happy celebration of happy 7 years. And, cause it's quite, the fact that you've been doing the same show for 7 years, and it's very impressive. And the Irish Fangirls are just wonderful people. And everybody should completely support them and give them all the love that you guys give us here on the Phantom Zone podcast, because they're just great people.
I couldn't have put it better myself. And so, of course, if you want to be like heroic Holly and share your thoughts about Loki with us, please do so by shooting us an email at fandomzonecast@gmail.com. That's fandomzonecast@gmail.com. Feel free to follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter. We certainly appreciate your follows and support. And Charles, when it comes to you, when you're not chilling here in the Fandom Zone, where can our fine listeners find you?
Well, of course, they can find me at Charles Skaggs on the Twitter machine, or at Charles Skaggs on Instagram or Facebook, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog of geeky things. Come on, you.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on the Fan Zone podcast, all kinds of comics news, comic book TV news, news of my other podcasts for Southgate Media Group, including, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, where if you're wanting to get more timey-wimey on, you want to come over there and check us out. Like I said, we just had Holly Mack on this past week talking Black Orchid, which was a lot of fun, from the Peter Davison era of Doctor Who. And then coming up next week, we're going to be, in 2 weeks, because we're shifting to a bi-weekly schedule for the summer. Christine Peruski, friend of the show, is going to be joining me as we discuss The Eaters of Light. And we're going to be doing one of our revisited commentaries. So we're going to be discussing that as we go back to the Peter Capaldi era, and we're going to be doing that as a commentary, like we do on Drunk Cinema. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun, only much more sober.
Sure.
So, and then Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast we do with Zan Sprouse, another friend of the show, where we talk all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, and we're going to be, hopefully next week, we're going to be discussing Blackout, which is the third and final episode of Hotel Room, the 1993 short-lived HBO series that they canceled after just 3 episodes. So kind of like Jupiter's Legacy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, HBO, for that. But it's very interesting because it's going to feature Crispin Glover and Alicia Witt. And Zan gets to crush on Crispin Glover just a little bit. So if you know Zan, that could be a very interesting discussion. And then last but certainly not least, Drunk Cinema, where just this past week we discussed Ghostbusters 1984. And I'm hoping to get that episode up tomorrow so that everybody can listen to it. It was Zan versus Apricot Brandy, and the Apricot Brandy won. So,
after how many rounds, I wonder?
It didn't take long. I'll just put it that way. It did not take long. After maybe a third of the bottle, but it was a very fun discussion, because Ghostbusters is one of our favorite movies. This is Ghostbusters 1984, by the way, and we had a great time. And I hope everybody checks it out, because I think you'll really enjoy it. And then coming up next on Drunk Cinema, here in a couple weeks, we're going to be doing RoboCop 1987.
Wow!
As part of our unofficial Peter Weller series of films. So after doing The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, so I hope everybody tunes in for that one.
Well, I will definitely second that, folks, and be sure to check out Charles and all the wonderful projects that he does, because they are fabulous.
And Nick, where can they find you out there in the wilds of the interwebs?
When it comes to me and you want to find out more about me and what I get up to on the interwebs, folks, I do host the Whiskey and Cigarettes Show. We play today's country, traditional country, everything else in between. For more info about that, visit our website, whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Podcast-wise, superhero movies are your speed. I do host Happiness and Darkness, a superhero movie podcast. Discuss all superhero movies under the sun. You can find us, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, and the Instagram. And last but certainly not least, we do also host, along with Rachel Friend and Zan Sprouse, Gold Standard, which recently turned 1 year. So we're the baby here in the podcasting
Happy
world.
anniversary.
Thank you very much, Charles. Yes, so we turned 1 year on. We discussed From Here to Eternity while we were at it. Coming up next, we'll be discussing On the Waterfront, great movie with Marlon Brando. And of course, you can find Gold Standard on Facebook and Twitter. And when it comes to this show, next time on episode 221 of the Fandom Zone, we will, of course, be discussing episode 2 of Loki. And you know it's going to be good. We don't have a title for you yet, folks, but I know it's going to be great. And Charles, any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I just want to add that as we tune in on June 16th, 2021, for episode 2 of Loki, I might like to add that, well, hey, that's going to be one of my birthday presents because yours truly is turning 52 on June 16th. So I get to celebrate. I get to go out, for, lunch, and I'm going to go, get my comics, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to watch some Loki, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's another little bonus birthday gift for yours truly, and I hope you guys tune in and then come on back to for episode 221. I think it's going to be a really fun time, especially now that we're just now getting into the main story after all this great setup. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed you driving the bus this time, Nick. You did a fantastic job as always. And everybody is going to be like, well, hey, let's just make Nick the permanent regular because, he's so much better and everybody loves you. And so... But, that's okay. I'm cool with it. And I can't wait to see what these next 5 episodes are going to hold for both of us here.
I'm right there with you. And as I turn a deeper and deeper shade of red, folks, all I'm going to be saying here is definitely looking forward to discussing this next episode with you, Charles, and definitely will be sending you possibly a nice little call for your birthday. And I think it's fantastic. Again, a nice little present from the God of Mischief. Not many folks can say that they got a present from Loki.
That's
so that's definitely something to be proud of. So, folks, we will, of course, see you next time with episode 2 of Loki. Until then, keep watching the skies. Ciao, everybody.
Bye, everybody.